In 1919, the United States Geological Survey published this official declaration saying that American oil reserves would be completely exhausted by 1930. I mean, just 11 years later.
Right, just completely gone.
Yeah, exactly. They said the wells would run dry, the pumps would stop, and basically the whole industrial engine of the early 20th century would just seize up entirely.
Which obviously did not happen.
No, not at all. 1930 came and went, and the U.S. just went on to produce staggering amounts of oil for the next century. But the crazy thing is, that wasn't an isolated prediction.
No, it really wasn't. It's just one part of this much bigger story.
Right. It's merely one chapter in this, century-long geopolitical thriller. It's this persistent narrative that the world is perpetually on the absolute brink of running out of oil. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We're so glad you're here with us. We are looking at a massive stack of research today, mostly centered on this really extensive, in-depth interview with Professor Wachik Janaki.
Yes, who is a brilliant expert in political geography.
Exactly. And our mission today is to investigate why this specific doomsday scenario is so heavily entrenched in modern life. It's a wild ride.
It really is a pervasive narrative. And when you analyze the source material, you realize it operates almost completely detached from geological reality.
It's totally disconnected.
Exactly. We are dissecting a system where historical myths, hidden corporate agendas, and literally the fundamental wiring of human biology all collide. Janaki's analysis really forces us to reevaluate how we process information about resource scarcity.
Okay, so the core question we need to answer today is this. If the physical reality of oil depletion doesn't match the apocalyptic headlines, why has everyone been panicking about it for over a century?
To get to the root of that, we really have to reframe how resource transitions actually happen historically. The foundational premise here relies on this amazing quote from a former Saudi Arabian oil minister from a quarter century ago. He pointed out that the Stone Age didn't end because the world ran out of stones.
That is such a good point.
Right. It ended because we developed bronze. And the oil age won't end because we run out of oil. It will end because of technological progress.
Okay, let's unpack this because that reframing changes the entire calculus. It treats oil not as this, finite lifeline that we're desperately clinging to, but simply as a temporary technological standard.
Exactly. It's just a phase.
I mean, it's like thinking we stopped using CDs because the world ran out of plastic. We didn't run out. The supply chain was perfectly fine. We just invented streaming.
That is the perfect analogy. It tracks exactly with the market dynamics of energy. The transition away from fossil fuels will be driven by efficiency, utility, technological superiority, not by the absolute depletion of the resource itself.
So there'll still be oil down there.
Oh, absolutely. There will still be massive amounts of oil in the ground long after it stops being our primary energy source. But accepting that requires fighting our own biology.
Which brings us to the psychological thriller aspect of this.
Right. The constant drumbeat of this running out narrative isn't just a product of misinformed journalism. It literally exploits human neurological architecture.
The sources spend a significant amount of time on this biological aspect. Janaki points out that our brains are hardwired for catastrophic thinking. We process negative, threatening information with an intensity that is 3 to 50 times greater than positive or neutral information.
It is a profound asymmetry in our cognitive processing, but it makes perfect evolutionary sense.
Right, the survival instinct.
Exactly. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, false positives are annoying, but false negatives are fatal. Think about it. If an early hominid hears a rustling in the tall grass and assumes it's just the wind, well, they might get eaten by a leopard.
Game over.
Right. But if they assume it's a leopard and it's actually only the wind, they just waste a little energy climbing a tree. We are the genetic descendants of the hyper-vigilant pessimists. Our amygdalas are just optimized to latch on to existential threats.
So any narrative that features an impending collapse, like, say, the sudden exhaustion of the fuel that powers global agriculture and logistics that bypasses our analytical filters entirely, it triggers this deeply ingrained survival response. You see an article about an energy crisis, and your brain treats it like the leopard in the brush.
Precisely. And modern institutions, whether we're talking about media companies optimizing for clicks or political entities seeking leverage, they understand this mechanism intuitively, even if they don't know the exact neurology.
You know it works.
Oh, they definitely know. A headline that reads, "Global energy supply stable for foreseeable future generates zero physiological response." Nobody clicks.
Boring.
Right. But a headline reading 10 years left of affordable crude, that spikes cortisol. It demands attention. The attention economy is built on harvesting that primal biological fear.
Now, I understand the attention economics from a media standpoint. Fear sells, we all know that.
Wow.
But biological fear makes sense. Surely the panic about oil is backed by real science and historical data.
Right.
Because the 1919 USGS report wasn't some tabloid piece.
It was an official government document.
Exactly. So, are we to believe that top-tier scientists are just continuously falling victim to their own amygdalas? Or is there something structural happening here?
It's the latter, and it's a crucial distinction. We aren't looking at academic fraud here. We're looking at systemic incentive structures within the scientific funding ecosystem. Think about how research grants are actually allocated.
Follow the money.
Always. Grant committees and institutional review boards are inherently risk-focused. They prioritize funding research that addresses clear, quantifiable threats.
Wait, so are you saying scientists are just making this up for a paycheck?
Not outright making it up, no. It's a systemic bias. If I'm a researcher drafting a proposal, and my core thesis is that the current trajectory of resource extraction is totally sustainable and market forces will handle it naturally.
You're essentially arguing that there is no problem to solve.
Exactly. And grant committees do not allocate multi-million-dollar budgets to non-problems. To secure the massive funding necessary to run complex geological surveys, researchers are structurally incentivized to hypothesize a crisis.
Wow.
Yeah. If you predict a looming depletion event, you secure your lab's funding for the next decade. And this creates a huge feedback loop.
So the doom gets amplified and funded, while stability just gets ignored.
You nailed it. The academic community produces an outsized volume of literature focused on depletion because that is what the capital structure rewards. The doom gets peer-reviewed and eventually filters down to the public as absolute scientific consensus.
And we can track this feedback loop all the way back to the birth of the industry. I mean, the first commercial oil well was drilled in the U.S. in 1859, right?
Yes, in Pennsylvania.
And the source material notes that the first widespread public and scientific panics about oil reserves drying up began in the late 1860s.
Merely a decade after the industry began.
Just 10 years. It's staggering to think about. Before the combustion engine was even a major factor, before the industrial scale use of petroleum, the institutional panic had already begun.
Yeah.
It proves that the peak oil narrative isn't a reaction to modern consumption rates. It's just this constant psychological and institutional baseline.
And that baseline panic obscures the reality of what actually happens when an economy decides to engineer its way out of fossil fuel dependence. The transition isn't theoretical.
Right.
We don't have to guess what a post-oil substitution looks like because, as Janaki highlights, a massive rebellion against the oil standard already happened.
So what does this all mean? If we aren't running out of oil, will we be stuck using it forever?
Not at all. That rebellion already successfully happened, not in a lab, but on the streets of South America.
Yes, the Brazilian rebellion. We are talking about Brazil's radical shift. This is where the geopolitical mystery transitions into practical engineering. In the early 1980s, around 1983, I think Brazil realized they were structurally vulnerable, right?
Very. They had a rapidly growing population and a massive reliance on imported oil.
So instead of waiting for a depletion crisis, the government aggressively forced the market to adapt. They basically gave an ultimatum to automotive companies. Redesign your engines to run on totally alternative fuels, or you lose the Brazilian market.
Right, and we aren't talking about the standard 10% ethanol blends you see at a gas station today. They mandated engineering for engines capable of running on B100.
Which is 100% alcohol from sugarcane.
Exactly. Or D100, which is 100% organic vegetable oil.
And from an engineering standpoint, running a pure alcohol fuel is not easy. It's highly corrosive. Brazil forced these huge manufacturers to entirely re-engineer their fuel delivery systems.
And they did it. The technology worked and it scaled beautifully. But the most revealing part of Janaki's analysis here is the economics.
Yes, this blew my mind.
The actual physical production cost of this highly refined agricultural alcohol is remarkably low. He calculates the raw production cost at roughly 50 Polish gruzy per liter.
Which is basically mere pennies.
Yes. When you see high prices for biofuels at the pump, you aren't paying for the production. You are paying a compounded stack of government taxes, logistics, and heavy retail margins. The core process is dirt cheap.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If it costs pennies and works perfectly, why isn't the entire globe pouring sugarcane into their gas tanks right now?
Yeah.
Why hasn't this solved the global energy equation?
Because you run straight into a devastating macroeconomic trade-off. Land isn't made of rubber. The total acreage of arable land on Earth is essentially a fixed asset. If you start reallocating massive agricultural areas to grow fuel instead of food, you are directly removing that land from the global food supply chain.
It's a strict zero-sum game.
Exactly. And the geopolitical consequences are severe. This directly drives up global food prices. Now, the impact of that is violently asymmetrical. For someone in Norway or Switzerland, a 20% increase in global grain prices just means a slightly higher grocery bill.
Right, an annoyance.
But for someone in developing nations, places like Niger or Chad, where people might spend up to 60% of their tiny income just on basic food, that same price spike isn't just inflation.
It's starvation.
Yes. Scaling the Brazilian model globally would pit the energy demands of the developed world directly against the nutritional survival of the developing world. Solving the climate and oil issue this way directly worsens global hunger.
Wow, that is a heavy, dark twist. The stakes of this transition are incredibly high. So, with alternative fuels advancing and proven to work, what are the massive global oil empires doing behind closed doors while they pretend oil is their only future?
What's fascinating here is how the entities that profit most from oil are quietly preparing for its demise. Let's look at the sovereign level first. Take Norway.
Right, the Norway strategy.
Norway was once a relatively poor fishing nation. Then they found massive oil reserves in the North Sea. But they knew it wouldn't last forever. They knew the Stone Age dynamic.
So they didn't just spend it all.
No, they acted with intense long-term rationality. They funnel their massive oil profits into a sovereign wealth fund. They're essentially building a post-oil safety net, an impenetrable economic fortress for future generations.
That's incredibly smart. But what about the corporate giants, like Shell and BP?
Oh, they are heavily investing in research for alternatives. Carbon capture, synthetic fuels, hydrogen. They know the historical data on corporate collapse. In the business world, the cautionary tales are Kodak and Nokia.
Oh, Nokia is the perfect parallel here. They went from making galoshes to completely dominating the mobile phone market globally, but they missed the smartphone wave and crashed almost overnight.
Right, and Kodak actually invented digital photography but hid it to protect their film sales. The market moved anyway, and Kodak collapsed. The oil supermajors are terrified of becoming the Kodak of energy.
So it's like a blockbuster action star secretly taking directing classes because they know they're aging out of the superhero roles, all while telling the press they've never been fitter.
That is exactly it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, admitting that the oil era is ending would crash their stock prices overnight. Institutional shareholders would panic, so they secretly finance their own exit strategy while publicly defending the narrative of infinite future demand.
Okay, so the corporations are hedging their bets. Norway is saving its money. What about OPEC?
OPEC plays a completely deceptive game. They're driven by short-term maximization. Instead of admitting oil utility is shrinking, member nations constantly claim they are finding more massive reserves.
Wait, really? Like fake discoveries?
Well, massive upward revisions. Sudden miraculous discoveries in Brazil's Santos Basin or in Kazakhstan or Guyana. And why do they do this? Because OPEC export quotas are mathematically tethered to stated reserve size. Claiming more oil equals a higher export quota, which means more global market share, more power, and more profit today.
So they flood the zone with claims of infinite supply just to maintain leverage right now.
Exactly. It's a collective illusion. They keep dancing while the music is playing, pretending it will never stop.
This is just incredible. To tie all these threads together, we really need to explain to you, the listener, why this matters to your daily life. This whole deep dive is basically a masterclass in critical thinking.
Absolutely.
When you hear catastrophic news, whether it's about resource depletion, climate, or technology, you have to remember that biological negativity bias we talked about.
Your amygdala is looking for a leopard.
Exactly. Look past the fear-mongering. You have to follow the money, look at the academic funding structures, and uncover those hidden corporate strategies. We outgrade resources, we don't just run out of them.
But, you know, this raises an important question to leave everyone with.
What's that?
We've talked about how places like Norway are saving their oil wealth for a post-oil world, and the corporate giants are quietly pivoting. But what happens to the global power balance, and specifically to highly populated, unstable petrostates, when the world finally achieves a cheap, clean alternative and the demand for oil drops to zero overnight?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the nations that didn't build a wealth fund.
Exactly. How will nations that have built absolutely no safety net survive the end of the Stone Age of oil? The geopolitical fallout from the nations left behind could reshape the global map entirely.
That is a terrifying and fascinating thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you are fed, watch out for your own biological biases, and we'll see you next time.